Okay, in this video I'm going to show you the easiest way to swap out a surface mounted IC like you see here. To demonstrate, I'm just going to take this old USB SIM card reader, which I no longer use, and I will show you how to swap out this 14-pin surface mount IC. Now, I've tried many different ways. You could try using a very thin desoldering braid and draw away the solder on each one of these pins and then lift each leg, but to me that was really a pain in the neck, and then you could always run into the problem where excessive heat may damage the traces. So the way which I found out to be the best way, and it comes out perfect, I've never had a problem doing it, is you take a very small cutter. Alright, now this is a very small cutter right here. I got this at Radio Shack many years ago. It's a flush cutter. And what I did is I modified the tip. I made it narrower. So when it opens, you can get into tighter spots and cut things. So the best way to do this is you're going to get your flush cutter. Let's rotate it this way so it's easier for me to work on it. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my cutter, my flush cutter that I modified the tip on, and I'm going to go to each one of the pins and cut it away nice and cleanly. You're not going to want to rock or anything like that. You don't want to damage any of the traces. So I'm going to reach in. I'll reach into this one and I'll cut it. Alright. That's 1, 2, 3, 'kay. Now I'm going to turn it around. Get the rest of them. You could hear it clicking after each cut. Alright, so now that I've clipped every single one off, I should be able to lift up this integrated circuit that I want to change out. Alright, should be able to lift it. Okay, so that's off. Alright, so this is the bad one. I'm going to toss that away. Now the next step, you have to remove the legs that are still attached to each one of these pads. And that's easily done if you take a very fine tip 15-watt soldering iron. Make sure it's properly tinned. And you're going to touch it to each one of these pads. The solder will melt. And the leg that you cut will come off with the soldering iron on the tip. Then you can just wipe it onto a cloth and move on to the next one. You do every single one of these until all of the legs have been removed from the old IC. It's critical that your soldering iron is the right diameter tip and that it's properly tinned. There it is. Alright, that one came out perfect, and it's now it's hard to see. Let me move it down. You can see on the very top is part of the leg. I'm just going to wipe that on a cloth. A little bit of flux also helps on the tip. Go to the next one. That one's gone perfectly. Alright, that's 2 down. You can see it right on the tip, right there. Do every single one of these, and then I'm going to show you the next step. Okay, you can see all of the pads are now nice and clean. There are no more legs from the old IC on these pads. The next step is to take some the next step I will be using a liquid no clean rosin core flux. I'm going to put that on a Q-tip. And gently apply the flux over all the tips, over all the pads. And I'm going to touch the soldering iron to each one of these pads now, and the solder will flow beautifully onto each pad in preparation for the IC. Now I use this block, it's called sal ammoniac. It's ammonium chloride, and it's used for tinning the tips of your soldering irons. Primarily used for stained glass work for soldering irons, but I also use it on my soldering irons for electrical. And what you do is you just take a little bit of solder, put it on the tip, and then you rub it on the stone. Keep rubbing it, working it in, and it tins the tip very nicely. Keep doing that, and then you're going to rub it on a paper towel, and you're good to go. Okay, so now that we applied some of the no clean flux to all the pads, and just touch each pad very quickly, just to let the solder flow nicely onto each one. Okay, so as you can see, the pads are all ready for the new IC to go in position. See, it's very tiny, it's on the tip of my pinky. I'm going to apply a little bit of no clean flux to all the legs, and then I will be placing it in position. And then I'll be using my helping hands to push downward, like that, onto the IC to maintain the positioning while I solder 2 legs in of the IC, one on each corner. Once each corner is soldered, I can remove the pressure from the helping hands, and I can continue on to each leg. Going to very carefully lay the IC in position. Making sure that the dot is where the notch was on the painted outline of the IC on the circuit board. Get it into the right position. Okay. That looks pretty damn good right there. Helping hands is going to put pressure onto the IC to keep it down, keep it from moving. Now, while this is being held in position so it can't move, what I'm going to do, now you want to use the thinnest rosin core solder wire that you can find. I just happen to run out of the really thin one I have, so for this demonstration I'll be using the larger, which is not the ideal size. You want it to be as thin as possible to avoid putting excessive amounts of solder and avoid bridging, but I could handle it using this, so I'm going to demonstrate. Alright. Very difficult with the camera and the magnifying glass to show you this, but I'll try. Okay, that one's perfect. Let me do one at this end, and then I can remove the helping hands. Now I'll remove the helping hands. Now I could do my... Alright, so this corner is done, and this corner is done. Okay. Now on each one of these pins, I'm going to apply solder. Just Just touch a little more of the flux to each one of the legs. Good. All right. Not easy with the camera in the way and the magnifier. Okay, every one of those legs is done. Right there's a good shot. No solder bridges. Just remember, use a thin solder wire when you do this. Don't use the one that I used. I did pretty good considering I was using such a thick wire. Alright, you want to use one like half the thickness of this solder. The solder wire you want to use is a rosin core 6040, and you want to have it half the diameter of this wire right here. Came out pretty damn good considering I used a thick wire to demonstrate. It's complete, all ready to go.